you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it. And I will send my angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanite, and the Amorite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a rebellious people. He says, I'm not going with you, and believe me, it's an act of mercy that I'm not. I'll send my angel to go before you. And when the people heard these grave tidings, they mourned, and no one put on his jewelry. They began to mourn. Now it's interesting what God is saying to the children of Israel here. He is saying, listen, I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to send you into the land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. I'm going to provide for your daily needs in abundance. I'm going to provide the victory that you need in order to take that land. I'm going to provide everything that you need. All of the wisdom, all of my word, everything that you need. But I'm not going with you. In other words, God is saying, I'm giving you my provision, but not my presence. And even in as horrible a state as the children of Israel are right here, they mourn over that. They're grieved over that. That God would say, listen, I'll provide for you, but you won't have my presence. And they understand what so often is lost sight of today. And so many people are content with God's provision, and they care nothing of His presence. The relationship that they have with Him is just in the context of Him as the provider. Just as long as He provides, as long as He's the big butler in the sky, I'm satisfied. No need for His presence in my life or walking with Him or the beauty of that. As long as He's provider. But even in their desperate condition, they understand that that is to settle for far less than what God ought to be in any life. And they mourn over it. They take off all of their jewelry. For the Lord had said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. I could come up in your midst in one moment and consume you. Now therefore take off your ornaments, that I may know what to do with you. In other words, he says to them, remove all your jewelry, all your fancy schmancy stuff that makes you look like you're something other than a sinner and a rebellious person against me. And humble yourself before me. No disguises. And to their credit, they do it. So the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by Mount Horeb. So the pride and the rebellion of God's people is dealt with here. And haven't you noticed that He deals with pride and rebellion? Oh man. He's quick to show up and to work until He has us mourning over that condition. He's a good God. And Moses took his tent. The tabernacle isn't built yet. He took his personal tent and he pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And so here, the people in their pride and in their rebellion, they had driven God outside of the midst of their life and their national life. And so God has Moses put the tent, an outward example of what the people had done to God. I wonder where God would show up on this planet in terms of where He's been relegated to by man's decisions. And so Moses takes and he puts his tent out there. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. So they had put him out there. God says, okay, I'm going to go out there to represent the distance that is between you and me, but you can still come to me. Those who want to seek me can still come to me. And so it was whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle that all of the people arose And each man stood at his tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. And it came to pass when Moses entered the tabernacle that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. And all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose and worshipped, each man in his tent door. And so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face. Now Moses isn't seeing his face. No man can see God and survive. But face to face was an expression for no mediator, nobody in between. As a man speaks to his friend, and he would return to the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. And then Moses said to the Lord, See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you've said, I know you by name, and that you have also found grace in my sight. And so Moses is saying to God, listen, God, you've told me to go ahead, but you haven't told me that you're going to go with me. You're talking to me about angels. I don't know angels. You I know. And you say that I have grace in your eyes. If I have grace in your eyes, Lord, then you come with me. Because in Moses' mind and in Moses' life, the provision was not enough if it was apart from the presence of God. He'd already had provision in Egypt. He knew what it was like to have enormous wealth, to have all of the milk, all of the honey, all of the anything that he could want. But he had all of it apart from God. And now, he's a wily old veteran of life. And he looks and he says, I've already done that. I don't want all of that. I don't want anything the world has apart from you, even if it's all of the world apart from your presence and enjoying it in the context of you and in fellowship with you. We understand that. Now therefore I pray, verse 13, if I have found grace in your sight, show me now your way, that I may know you, and that I may find grace in your sight, and consider that this nation is your people. And God said, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And then he said to God, if your presence does not go with us, then do not bring us up from here. In other words, God, I would rather die in this desert in fellowship with you than to go to the land flowing with milk and honey apart from you. For how then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except that you go with us? And so we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth. Lord, the only thing that makes us different from everyone else is your presence in our life, your presence with us. Sure, we could go into the land of milk and honey, but we would become just like everyone else. And we don't want to be like everyone else. It's your presence with us, and even more superior in the New Testament, your presence in us. Because of the work of Jesus Christ on the cross and that ministry of the Holy Spirit, it is that and that alone that makes us different from the world. We are surely not different because of anything within us. It's all grace. And then the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. And this Moses, he's a smart cookie. He's been talking about grace, 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 grace. And here God speaks about grace in verse 17. In other words, Moses was asking God that God would not only be present with them, but that he would be present with them on the basis not of their obedience, but on the basis of grace. And God said, all right. And then Moses said, he's on a roll. Please show me your glory. I just like that. I've always liked that verse. It'd be like the average guy would just say, got more than I thought, I'll fold. Your presence, your word, your promises, your victory on the basis of grace, I'm satisfied. Good enough. But there must be something about spending time with God, 40 days on a mountaintop, that doesn't even allow you to be satisfied with that. And Moses speaks to God and he says, God, show me your glory. Let me see your glory. Show it to me. And here, interestingly enough, is a prayer that God answers. God isn't even going to force him to wait even a few verses to see this. Give me fresh vision, understanding, Lord, of your glory. And then the Lord says to him, you want to see my glory? Here's how I'll do it. I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. What is the glory of God? Is it fireworks? Is it a Holy Ghost hoedown? You think about that. You think about that. If we were to say to God, God, show me your glory, what would come into our mind in terms of what he would do? Boy, bright lights all over the place. Just the way I think a UFO would be. You see the glory? The glory. We wonder, but you think about that. We think it'd be, sound and lights. We tend to think of it as something that he would do. But he said, I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will proclaim my name and tell you what my name means. I will declare my nature, because a name represented a person. I will declare my nature to you. And the glory of God is not what he does, but who he is. And his nature. And what he does is merely a manifestation, a very small manifestation of his glory, of who he is. It's who he is that's glorious. That's the glory. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man can see my face and live. You can't see me, but you can see a little bit of my glory, Moses. In that sense. Now the Lord said, here is a place by me, and you shall stand on the rock. And so it shall be, while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and will cover you with my hand while I pass by. And then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face you shall not be seen. Moses, I'm going to put you in this cleft of the rock, and I am going to cause my glory to pass by. I'm going to pass by, and all you can even take handling is the glory that's left after I pass by. Well, let's go at least as far as to him seeing this, hearing this. And the Lord said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. And so be ready in the morning, and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai, and present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. And no man shall come up with you, and let no man be seen throughout all of the mountain, let neither flocks nor herds feed before that mountain. You want to see my glory, Moses? It's going to mean walking alone. And so he cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. And then Moses rose early in the morning, and he went up Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, and he took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. And as we continue with Moses through this Pentateuch, these first 5 books of the Bible here, one of the characteristic phrases that is made concerning Moses, we find there in verse 4, as the Lord had commanded him. He did as the Lord had commanded him. And that is the key to seeing the glory of God. It's the key to seeing His goodness. It's the key to His glory and His goodness being manifest. Because as we walk in obedience to Him and in obedience to His Word, it is always to more fully discover Him, to be glorious and to be exactly who He said He was and says that He is. And obedience always reveals to us greater knowledge, greater understanding, greater experiential experience as it relates to God's glory. And then the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. And the Lord passed by before Moses and proclaimed, the Lord, and here is the glory of God. Here is His nature, who He is, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, abounding in goodness and truth. Is that your picture of the Father? What do you think of the Father? Well, I like to deal with Jesus. I'm not so sure about the Father. He seems a little explosive to me. No, this is a description of the Father. Merciful, gracious, long-suffering, abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, by no means clearing the guilty. And notice the guilty. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generations. And it's important to note in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, that being a part of the 10 Commandments, that it is with the comment for those who hate God. And so if a person has parents who are God-haters, and they choose to walk in that rebellion against God, then the sins of the fathers will be passed on to that child. But if that child takes and turns and says, I am no God-hater, whether what my parents were or weren't doesn't matter to me, I love God, I want to follow God, I want to live for God, then you break that cycle. You can break it by an act of your will, because you don't hate God. So it doesn't move on you to subsequent generations. And so Moses made haste, and he bowed his head toward the earth, and he worshipped. This is too much for him. It's flipped out. And then he said, if now I have found grace in your sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray, go among us, even though we are a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. Bolder yet. Because that is the way that the Father is. He's going to do it. And so we'll stop there in verse 9 of chapter 34. And you can do me a favor next week. Though I fully expect a groan of unbelief from you. But read the remainder of Exodus, because we'll finish it next week. And I'll tell you why. All of the things that God had described to Moses to be built, the remaining chapters of the book of Exodus declare the fact that He built them. But everything is re-described totally, and I'm not going to read all of those chapters.